Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today on the Hill. It's a busy day with the return of the House, but before we get into the routines of Parliament, it's been my honour to host Prime Minister Theresa May in Canada's capital for our first official bilateral visit. This year, as we know, our country marks 150 years since Confederation, and it's fitting that we're visited by our friends from the UK, one of our closest partners and strongest allies. Prime Minister May and I shared an excellent meeting just now, and we have an event and a working dinner planned for later today. We last met at the G7 in Taormina, and today we discuss cooperation on a number of fronts that will grow our economies. Let me tell you about just a few of our initiatives. The Prime Minister and I agreed that going forward, our foreign, defence and development ministers will meet every year for a strategic dialogue on ways to further deepen our relationship. We also talked about trade. As we all know, CETA is almost over the finish line. This agreement will create jobs and stimulate growth for people in Canada and across Europe. Prime Minister May and I discussed the UK's ratification of CETA, as well as the importance of stability and continuity in the Canada-UK trading partnership into the future. And we've seen evidence of our strong economic ties just recently. Success stories include the UK expansion of the Canadian startup Hootsuite, and on our soil, the Tesco expansion into Canadian supermarkets. Dans le même esprit, nous sommes heureux aujourd'hui d'avoir signé un protocole d'entente sur le
we are happy to have signed today a Memorandum of Agreement on Science, Technology and Innovation. Canada and the United Kingdom are leaders in these fields. Henceforth, thanks to this agreement, our countries will collaborate and share information on new technologies, including agricultural technology and latest manufacturing trends. We are also pleased to announce the creation of a partnership on climate change, clean growth and renewable energy. Through this initiative, our public and private sectors will be able to work together with a view to reaching our innovation and clean energy goals. Indeed, our ambitions are alike in the matters of economic growth, and we know that our trade partnership will continue for many years to come. But we share much more than simple economic ties.
We're committed to working together on the international stage to address some of our most pressing, difficult challenges. We've instructed our officials to develop a joint initiative to enhance the role of women in UN peace support operations. This is part of our broader commitment to the empowerment of women and girls around the world. We've agreed to work together to enhance disaster recovery, reconstruction, and resilience efforts in the future as we prepare for and respond to natural disasters. And we'll continue to partner in defense and security across Europe and beyond. Friday's attack in London underlined once again why this close partnership is so vital. And allow me to reiterate once again that all Canadians wish a speedy recovery to those injured. Canada and the United Kingdom share a deep and rich history, with almost a third of Canadians today claiming British ancestry. We share a Queen and the Westminster parliamentary system, and we share fundamental values like democracy and the rule of law. The Canada-UK friendship has stood the test of time, and we will continue to work together in the years ahead to help citizens in both of our countries prosper. With that, I'm delighted to turn it over to Theresa for a few words.
Thank you, Justin, for having welcomed me here in Ottawa today.
For welcoming me here to Ottawa today. Canada and the United Kingdom, as you say, of course, have a long shared history. And this nation, conceived and created 150 years ago, has flourished. Over that time, British and Canadian soldiers, sailors, and airmen and women have fought and died alongside each other in the pursuit of freedom. We've developed the institutions of Westminster-style democracy, personal rights, and the common law. And we celebrate together our shared monarchy and close ties of family and friendship. My visit to Canada today is not only about recognising our past, but also looking ahead to our bright future. We are both countries with ambitions to lead on the world stage and progressive values that underpin those ambitions. We are both committed to ensuring our economies work for everyone, not just the privileged few. And that includes eliminating the gender pay gap once and for all. We've spoken today about the importance of closing that gap and championing the rights of women and girls around the world. That means ending the tyranny of domestic violence, sexual violence in armed conflict, and educational and economic exclusion. Our cooperation on this agenda is emblematic of the UK and Canada joining forces to share approaches at home and champion our shared values out in the world. We will also be discussing the ways in which our governments will work together to foster innovation, including measures that will allow business to harness the opportunities of clean growth. And we've confirmed our joint commitment to supporting the global transition away from a reliance on coal as an energy source. Once again, the UK and Canada will lead the way, and I'm pleased to announce that the UK will aim to phase out unabated coal by 2025. The UK and Canada have a strong and growing economic relationship, and we are natural partners in promoting the benefits of free trade. The EU-Canada Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, the bulk of which, as the Prime Minister said, comes into effect this week, has significant potential to boost transatlantic prosperity and the UK economy, eliminating 98% of Canadian import duties and massively increasing the opportunities for British exporters. And I'm pleased that we have agreed today that CETA should be swiftly transitioned to form a new bilateral arrangement between the UK and Canada after Brexit. As staunch champions of the power of free trade to grow our economies, Canada and the UK will also work together at the World Trade Organization to promote and spread the benefits of free trade. The rules-based international system established after the Second World War is under threat as never before, and we must make sure it can adapt and change to cope with new and emerging powers and the economic realities of globalization in order to deliver growth and opportunities for all. As we work to support the global economic rules-based order, so too do we stand firmly together in upholding the international norms that govern our security. And I'm pleased to announce that we will deepen our defence and security cooperation in Eastern Europe as we stand up to Russian aggression there. We've agreed concrete steps to improve our defence cooperation and our interoperability through new joint training for the Ukrainian armed forces from the beginning of next year. This will be the first joint training the UK has done with any other country inside Ukraine, and will involve joint reconnaissance training, joint counter-sniper training, and joint military police training. And we will conduct a joint UK-Canada military exercise in Latvia next month, under the umbrella of NATO's enhanced forward presence in Eastern Europe. To ensure NATO can respond to an ever-changing world, the UK and Canada will also be at the forefront of championing NATO reform and supporting its steps to modernise, including on cybersecurity. And today we have discussed how we will continue to work closely together on counter-terrorism and counter-extremism, sharing intelligence and expertise to build community cohesion. And I want to thank the Canadian people for their support and solidarity in the wake of the terrible Manchester and London attacks, including, of course, the attack just last week. You stood with us as we stood with you in the wake of the tragic Quebec attack. We will never be divided. The terrorists will not win. Our values will prevail. When we come together and work as one to project our shared values on the world stage, we form a powerful union. From our cooperation as G7 members, in the Commonwealth, and in dealing with the awful aftermath of Hurricane Irma, providing life-saving aid to those in need, to the inspirational Invictus Games, showcasing the power of sport to inspire recovery, support rehabilitation, and generate a wider understanding and respect of all those who serve their country. The UK and Canada stand side by side. And I'm very much looking forward to our visit later today to meet British and Canadian Invictus athletes. The values and principles which make our countries special are needed more than ever in the world today. So Britain and Canada can confidently face the future together.
Thank you.
Prime Ministers, good afternoon. Tana McCharles with the Toronto Star. You both spoke about earlier today a seamless transition from CETA to post-Brexit trade relations with Canada. You spoke just now about a swift transition. So can you tell me, did you agree today to start formal talks in that regard? And what would that look like? Is that going to be essentially a mirror image of CETA or a copy and paste? What does that transition look like? And is it underway now?
We spoke about the deep ties we have between Canada and the UK on the commercial side. The trade relationship is one that matters deeply to both of us. And we recognize that with CETA coming into force later this week, we're going to see a decrease of over 90% of all barriers to trade between UK companies and Canadian companies. Good for citizens, good for workers. We recognize the rules in place around negotiating with the EU and EU members, and we respect the need for the UK to determine its path forward with Brexit from the UK, from the EU. But at the same time, we know that there is in place CETA, as the UK has demonstrated time and time again its support for this trade measure. We will be able to move forward in a way that benefit in a smooth transition that keeps the essence of CETA applicable to the UK in ways that will respect the EU's requirements and rules.
We want to ensure that when we leave the European Union, for businesses and people, that change is as smooth and orderly as possible. And bringing CETA, working on CETA as becoming the first of the bilateral trade relationship between the UK and Canada, that means that seamless transition can take place. People will know the basis on which that trading relationship will be set up. And we will be having a working group which obviously will be looking at the details of how that transition will operate in detail.
Oui, bien sûr.
Of course, this is very good news for the European Union and also for Canada and the United Kingdom in a more specific way. CETA will be provisionally implemented, thereby eliminating over 90% of international trade barriers between Canada and the European Union, and especially between Canada and the United Kingdom. This will be the basis from which we will work on an agreement between Canada and the United Kingdom after Brexit. We will work on this transition over the next couple of years, and we will discuss how we will do this. We need to respect EU rules with regards to negotiations. CETA is coming into force. It is therefore reasonable as a first post-Brexit step to take CETA and its opportunities for the good of our workers so that we can make sure that there is a transition, an undisturbed transition during Brexit.
My follow-up is a bit of a tangent, but you both talked about progressive values. You share you're both heading to the UN this week, and I want to know, Aung San Suu Kyi is speaking from Myanmar tomorrow, and I want to know what you need to hear from her. What is your message to her? Canada has given her honorary Canadian citizenship. Is she worthy of that? What do you need to hear from her tomorrow?
Canada is extremely preoccupied with the plight of the Rohingya, the minorities, the Muslim minority in Myanmar. We have made our positions very clear. I spoke with Aung San Suu Kyi last week to impress upon her how important it was to de-escalate, to see the vulnerable populations supported, and to bring more peace and harmony to the region, but indeed to all of Myanmar. And I also just sent a letter to Aung San Suu Kyi laying out the important steps I think she and the Burmese government need to take in order to protect innocent lives and be consistent with the expectations not just Canada but the world has of her and of the Burmese government.
Thank you. And I would echo those comments in relation to a need to de-escalate the situation, ensure that vulnerable people within Burma, Myanmar are actually being able to be living life in security rather than at the moment, as we see, so many of them vulnerable, sadly, to attack, and so many leaving in many offices we know going into Bangladesh. I think it's important the situation is de-escalated so that Rohingya people are able to live in peace. John.
John Pinar, BBC News. Mrs May, it's an important week for Brexit, starting here, ending in Florence. But after seeing your Foreign Secretary accused by senior colleagues of backseat driving, can you say that you are truly in command of your cabinet and Brexit policy? And will you tolerate more backseat driving in future?
Well, look, the UK government is driven from the front, and we all have the same destination in our sights, and that is getting a good deal for Brexit with the European Union. That's a good trade deal, but also a good ongoing relationship in relation to other matters like security. And I've spoken in the past of the deep and special partnership that we want to build with the European Union. I believe that's not only in the interests of the United Kingdom, I think that's in the interests of the remaining 27 member states of the European Union as well, and that's what we're working for.
My follow-up is, Prime Minister, can you expect and can you tell us that we will see a Brexit plan for Britain which is clearer and on track by the end of the week? And Prime Minister Trudeau, it took 7 years for the EU to strike a deal with Canada. How long will it take for Britain to do the same thing?
Well, on the first point that you raised, John, of course we set out our plan for Brexit back in the speech I gave in Lancaster House in January. That was amplified in the Article 50 letter that I sent to the European Union, triggering the process of starting these negotiations. And I will be speaking, I've always said I will from time to time update, I'll be speaking about where we are in the negotiations and looking to the future on Friday. The negotiations are being conducted in a constructive and positive spirit, and we are making progress on the areas that we've been addressing so far. And of course, if you look to the relationship that we have with the European Union, it is a different point that we're starting from the point that Canada started when it started its trade negotiations.
Indeed, within the European Union, the UK is the largest trading partner that Canada has. So the UK was deeply involved throughout those negotiations towards CETA, obviously, over the past 7 years. And it will form the basis for the way we move forward in a post-Brexit Europe. We are very confident that we're going to be able to continue the strong trade ties and commercial relationships with the UK, between the UK and Canada, throughout this period of transition.
Oui, Blue Wind, Radio-Canada. Madame May,
Ms. May, with regards to trade negotiations that are upcoming, do you want a simple copy-paste of the CETA agreement? Mr. Trudeau, in these discussions, could this not ruffle a few feathers amongst European allies?
Well, on the first point, as I said earlier, we want to ensure that for businesses and individuals, there's a smooth change over when Britain leaves, when the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, as possible. We want to see as little disruption to economies and to people's lives. And that's why we believe it makes sense to take the trade agreements which the UK is part of, it's part of the European Union, with Canada, and say that that is the basis at that point at which we leave for a bilateral relationship with the UK and Canada. Now, of course, over time, it would then be possible, if we chose to change the details of that relationship, to do so. But I think at the point at which we leave, it's important that CETA is the basis of that transition. And just if I may, this is not something that this is something that we have discussed with the European Union and made clear that I think it makes sense that we have those smooth transitions.
Nous avons mis sur place avec la SCG.
Through CETA, we have implemented a framework that eliminates most international trade barriers between Canada and Europe. This, of course, includes the United Kingdom. It is therefore logical and expected that CETA with Europe be a basis for a future negotiation and trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Of course, once Brexit becomes official, we will continue to speak with the European Union and the United Kingdom on the next steps to take. details where CETA is not fully aligned with Canada and the United Kingdom's priorities. As a first basis, it will allow us to have a very reassuring transition for investors, for business owners, and for Canadians and the British people.
In English, there is no question that CETA, which eliminates well over 90% of all barriers between trade between Canada and the European Union, which of course includes, as it was negotiated, the UK, will make an excellent basis for ensuring a smooth transition in a post-Brexit world. After that, there will obviously be opportunities for us to look at particular details that could be improved upon for the specific needs and opportunities in the bilateral relationship between the UK and Canada. But as a strong basis for a smooth transition, CETA is perfectly designed and will be able to ensure for investors, for companies, and for workers and consumers, a smooth transition.
Je veux faire un suivi sur Bombardier.
A follow-up on Bombardier. Prime Minister May, will you be talking about the Bombardier file with President Trump this week? If so, what will you say? Mr. Trudeau, how far will you go to leverage this file?
I have already raised the issue with President Trump in a telephone call I had with him last week, but I will raise it with him, the issue of Bombardier with him when I meet him again later this week. And I will be impressing on him the significance of Bombardier to the United Kingdom, and particularly obviously to jobs in Northern Ireland. And we have discussed today how we can work together and to see a resolution of this issue, which from my point of view, I want to see a resolution that protects those jobs in Northern Ireland.
Défendre les emplois, les bons emplois liés à l'aérospatiale.
Defending good aerospace jobs, and specifically defending this excellent, the excellent C-Series aircraft is a priority for us. And that is why I'm very happy to be working with Prime Minister May to explain to the American administration how Boeing's actions are harmful to workers here in Canada, harmful to economic growth in our countries, also harmful to the future of the aerospace industry in the whole world. We know that the C-Series represents significant leaps ahead that Boeing is currently hindering for very narrow reasons, and for trade-related reasons linked to their profits. That is not the way the world should operate. We will always defend the interest of our workers and economic growth in our countries. We will always defend technological progress towards a greener future in the aerospace industry. I will continue to defend Canadian jobs at every single level, especially in particular with the US President.
Sorry, let me just answer that one in English, and I'll go to you, George. The jobs, the good quality jobs that come directly from the aerospace industry in Canada, in Northern Ireland, are important to both of us and important to Canadians and people around the world. We will continue to stand up for jobs and stand up for the excellent airplane that is the Bombardier C-Series aircraft. The actions that Boeing has taken is very much in their narrow economic interest to harm a potential competitor, and quite frankly is not in keeping with the kind of openness to trade that we know benefits citizens in all countries around the world. We are going to continue to work together and impress upon the American administration, including President Trump himself, how important it is to defend Canadian jobs and the impact of the positive innovations related to the C-Series aircraft. We will continue to stand up strongly in defense of Canadian jobs against unwarranted actions by Boeing.
George.
Okay, George Parker from the Financial Times. I wonder if I could just follow up on the Bombardier point. Did you discuss the possibility that the UK and Canada could use their commercial muscle to put pressure on Boeing to drop the case, for example, by refusing to buy Boeing aircraft in the future? And a question to the Prime Minister, since we're in Canada, there's a live debate going on in the Cabinet about whether our future European relationship could be based partly on the Canadian relationship, the so-called CETA minus, or CETA plus rather. Or do you think there's a counter-argument, isn't there, that you could follow the judgments of the European Court of Justice and stay very close to the European Union rulebook? Which one of those options do you favour?
Well, and I think on the Bombardier point, and we've made clear that we want to ensure that we're protecting jobs in this area, and obviously for the United Kingdom, the Bombardier jobs in Northern Ireland are important, and we want to protect those. Of course, there is a process that is being undertaken now, and there will be a preliminary judgment in the US next week in relation to this case, but that will just be a preliminary judgment, and it'll be possible for us to continue to work together to try and bring about the resolution that we want. And George, I don't recognise the simple binary approach that you have to the question of Brexit and the future relationship of the UK with the European Union post-Brexit. I've always said that we're not looking for to take a model off the shelf of a relationship that currently exists because of the position the UK is in. This is unique. We're already in the European Union, and so we have a relationship with the EU already. When we come out, we want to ensure that we can negotiate a good deal, a bespoke deal, a deal that is right for the United Kingdom. And I think that the deal that will be right for the United Kingdom will also be in the economic interests of the European Union as well.
On the issue of Boeing, it's been very clear that Canada is embarking upon a procurement process to strengthen our military and to do right by the men and women of the Canadian Forces by ensuring that we have the right equipment and the ability to do their jobs responsibly. That includes replacing our fleet of fighter jets. And we have obviously been looking at the Super Hornet aircraft from Boeing as a potential significant procurement of our new fighter jets, but we won't do business with a company that's busy trying to sue us and put our aerospace workers out of business.
Yeah, and Prime Minister, I'm
going to have to say that one in French because I saw the Quebec reporters perk up on that one.
We have committed ourselves to a renewal of our military air flotilla, especially with regards to fighter jets. Everyone knows that we are currently considering Super Hornets as a potential option, a possibility. But what is sure is that if Boeing were to continue to insist on eliminating tens of thousands of jobs in Canada through their attack against Bombardier, as a government, they should not expect us to buy planes off them if they are attacking our industries.
Mrs. May, just a follow-up question to you about Brexit. Today it's been disclosed you've changed the structure of your negotiating team. Ollie Robbins, your so-called Sherpa, will no longer be running the Department of Exiting the European Union. Isn't that a sign that you got this wrong in the first place, and frankly the negotiating structure has been a bit of a shambles?
No, not at all. What it is a sign of is that the negotiations are getting into a more detailed and more intense phase. And as a result of that, I think it's right that Ollie Robbins concentrates on that, and obviously a different structure will be put in place, different answer will be put in place in terms of the running or the management of the Department for Exiting the European Union and the permanent secretaryship there.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.